Hello, I'm Alan Furstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, same with you, Alan. You've been doing well?
Pretty well. How about you?
Yep, I've had the week off and have been enjoying some side projects. So just hanging out, checking social media, and hanging out with family. So
Side projects are always fun. Family's even better, though. So good to
yes,
hear. I've been hanging out with family myself, and that's been enjoyable. But you said hanging out on social media. I know one of the things that both of us like to do are hang out on the various forums and Stack Overflow and and Discord and Slack, the various places where people are running into problems and trying to get help. And I noticed what I feel like is an interesting trend over the past week or so
hmm,
is I've seen a lot of questions that they all take different shapes, but they all kind of boil down to I have this file on my server and I can access it fine, but for some reason, Google can't, the assistant can't, Alexa can't, the review process fails because they tell me they can't access the file, by terms of service. So maybe we can, as since both of us are have a firm grounding in web development, maybe we can talk a little bit about the various causes that can be causing problems like this. What
yeah,
do you
no, that
think?
sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Now, one of the more interesting ones that I see every so often is somebody will post something like, I made a Google Doc for my privacy policy in terms of service. And both Alexa and Google require a privacy policy
Right.
that you have public. But the reviewers say they can't access it, but I can access it fine. Why is that? So always lots of possible reasons for what can cause that. The first one that I usually run across is that, if you put it in a Google Doc, you need to make sure you share it publicly.
Yeah, no,
It's
that just because you can have access to it, and the things get cached on your computer, or you've got permissions. You're already logged in, but don't necessarily realize it, and you're accessing stuff. You're like, hey, this is great. This is working just fine, and then somebody else can't. Yeah.
right. No, exactly. And the biggest solution I have that I always recommend, first thing I always tell people to try is try it with an incognito window or an
Yep.
anonymous window or whatever your browser of choice chooses to call it. That really makes sure you've got no cookies and no credentials, and you're looking like a nobody.
Yep.
And see if you can still access the file.
Yeah, and that helps. Sometimes you ship a link off to somebody else and say, "Hey, can you try this? I just want to double check that
Am I going crazy or?
yeah, is this just me?"
Yeah, no, definitely always a good point to call in somebody else if you're having problems, but make sure that person isn't, in the same household, isn't, if it's corporate, isn't in the
Yeah,
same company. Because again, who knows what they could be permitted to as well already.
yeah, and I'm finding more and more that it didn't used to be that everything had to be HTTPS, but more and more, even simple things need to be HTTPS, or they're going to pass some sort of validation check or something that's if you're talking about the certification process. Sometimes that's a requirement. You don't necessarily realize that your public web link has to be SSL.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And here's actually one of the kickers. It was one of the other problems that I saw is somebody was reporting that they had an audio file on their server,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an HTTPS server. And when they had set up a flash briefing to access it using RSS, was accessing the audio fine, no problems. When they set up a regular skill that would return it, it wasn't accessing the audio. And when testing it using the simulator from the Alexa console, it was giving really, really bizarre errors. And after a lot of research, and I'm not even sure that they fully tracked it down, but after a lot of research, it looked like their web server was only serving a couple of very narrow SSL protocols. So the encryption formats that were being used by HTTPS, only a couple of them were listed as valid. And that set that was valid wasn't sufficient for what Alexa or the console were looking for.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it was a very bizarre set of problems, but it does, kind of point to, if you're setting up HTTPS, it's not always, HTTPS can be a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, no, were you able to find things like in the developer console, like errors in the console log or something from the network trace or anything that would give indications?
That's actually a great point. One of the things that the person did, and actually I think that's a great point, that the first thing you should do when you're running into problems like that is look to the logs. The console log in your browser, the network trace log, and then go to the server and see what your logs on the server say. And what the server logs were saying is they didn't see a request at all, which usually means that it was an error much deeper than any access log. So it was saying nobody's requested this. Well, if it's an SSL layer, it's a layer below what would be logged in the usual logs that you look at. The console log in the browser was giving an error, and it made absolutely no sense. Which again is a good indicator that something very strange is going on.
Yeah, that reminds me, because like similarly, there was a problem where in order to do audio and SSML for Alexa, then it needs to be hosted at HTTPS, audio file, and there's certain requirements for what type of audio file it is, and what the bit rate and all that stuff. There are some very limited, criteria for the audio that is supported, but this particular problem was something that was working, and then all of a sudden it stopped working. And it seemed
Don't you hate those?
No, I love those. No, I hate them, actually, because you're just like, this is not what it bothers me when something doesn't make sense. Even if I fix something and it doesn't make sense why now it's fixed, it still bothers me, because I'm like, okay, this is just, I just lucked into this solution. I don't know. And that happens plenty, by the way. That's just because you're a dev with years of experience doesn't mean that you don't just sometimes fall into the solution. But it's always better when you know or understand, well, okay, find a story that makes sense as far as why that was a problem and why what you did fixed it. But this particular issue was something I'd have to go back and look, and this showed up on Twitter and in a Slack as well. But I think it was a situation where playing the audio via SSML via the simulator wasn't working, but the device was working. But it was something with core settings. All of a sudden, they were requiring a certain, God, I don't even remember what cross-origin. I can't even remember what core stands for.
Resource security,
something like
settings.
That. Yeah. But you need to be able to say that, this web could accept, what type of, whether it be a GET or a POST, and are you going to limit it to who can access it? And so sometimes it's a setting like that throws you off.
CORS is really tricky and really annoying, and it makes a lot of sense. But for resources like this, it's almost always where you want to explicitly say, on the server side, allow any resource from any domain to access this other resource. And it's, every time I look at CORS, on the surface, I look at it and I go, oh, this is easy. And then as I start digging into it, I'm like, wait a minute, what? Yeah, CORS is definitely one of the most common stumbling blocks I see when trying to access mixed origin resources. Yeah. And by that, and to explain what a mixed origin resource is in general, if I have a web page at prisoner.com and it wants to load a graphics from example.com, example.com needs to explicitly allow me to do that. Otherwise, most modern browsers won't allow it. And the way most sites allow that access is just by saying, anybody who wants access to this resource can get it. Well, we're going to allow it.
It's a public available resource. Doesn't matter where you're requesting it from.
But there are certainly circumstances where, especially for secure items, you want to limit who does end up with access to that. And a lot of servers come configured with a very narrow set of resource sharing. So,
and if you think about it, like when in the Alexa world, like if you're playing an audio file, the audio file really is being loaded by something like the Alexa service, or in some cases that might even be. I think in the audio it happens at the Alexa service level, where if you've got SSML that has maybe text and audio, it gets mixed and blended into an audio file at the Alexa service layer before that is passed down to the device to actually play on the speaker. But images is kind of like a web browser, where the device itself is going out to this public resource to get the image to show in your APL or something. And so and you don't really know where
it's coming from and who. We should actually look into this and do a segment on exactly how audio requests and image requests look like they're being loaded from, because lots of people still do resource tracking and logging. That might be something we should look at.
That does seem interesting. We could figure that out. I'm sure some way.
A few tests. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be just a few tests. It'll be easy, and then lead us down a rabbit hole.
Oh, of course.
But it occurs to me that another thing that can often trip up some of the resource handling is a lot of sites still do filtering based on the user agent. Yeah. Particularly for, use that as filtering for bots. So if it looks like your user agent is a bot rather than a real browser, then they may filter it, they may block it, they may require, an additional, if they think it may not be from a browser, they may implement CAPTCHA. I never knew how to pronounce it.
the annoying screen where you have to try to figure out what the characters are, or
how many traffic lights there are, or
exactly,
or check the box that says you're not a bot, no lying, honest. Or may throw one of those up and interrupt the flow. So if you're sometimes just testing from an incognito browser isn't enough to make sure your resource is available. It's you got to look at a huge set of logs to say, well, okay, where did this get blocked? Did this get blocked on my firewall? Did this get blocked in my server? What's restricting access here and why?
Also, sometimes you need to think about it, like if you make a change and that, like on the web, and you post some new content or assets, and you're not getting the updated version, you need to remember or think about, do I have a CDN, a content delivery network that's caching things, and did I forget to invalidate the cache so that it gets the latest versions of things?
I can easily imagine that for larger projects, especially, that's a real issue.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like in this situation with APL, you could create your own like custom components and package them in a separate JSON file and host them. And if you just have one file and then you make changes to it and you expect those changes to be what gets pulled down, that might not happen. That might be cached like on the device itself. and it may not pick up the newer versions. And so you have to make sure that you have a good versioning policy. So you're going to deploy this at a URL that has the version number as part of the URL, so that you're actually going to, a different version of this. And, so over time, as you're updating, then the newer stuff can get the newer version, and you don't have to worry about things being cached and not getting changes because you're doing it all in the same file.
Yep. No, excellent point. So yeah, it's really amazing. There's lots of things that we need to pay attention to, all of which are web related. That when things go well, they go really well, and when you run into problems, there are bumps in the road.
Yeah, I remember talking with somebody that had joined a company, and they were junior programmer. Actually, they were an intern, and just talking about, well, do you understand how the HTTP protocol works? That it's a request and a response, and all this stuff that we're working on with developing for Alexa or for Google Assistant is based on REST, the HTTP protocol, all this stuff. And so if you don't necessarily understand that it is this request response or kind of how that works, then it seems kind of mysterious. And so just taking the 30 minutes or whatever to kind of walk through and say this is how it works on a basic level, and let's take a look at when we hit an endpoint on the browser, what does the network tab say in the developer console? Oh, see the request, see the response. This and just kind of making sure that basic foundation is understood, because it seems to be just
it's not always understood by everyone.
It is, yeah. It's just kind of just jumping into it. You don't necessarily know that, there are some basic protocols that things are built on top of. And it's just amazing, really, having been with the web since the beginning, to see, a simple, I hit this URL and I get this static web page back, and the browser renders the HTML, and just the HTML, right? This is even before CSS and JavaScript.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff. Then you just kind of start thinking or seeing how things are built on top of it. Like, oh, now we have REST APIs. Oh, REST APIs are really the same type of thing, but request response. And so,
yep. No, actually, what? I think that will make for another segment, another time, to discuss some of these basic underlying technologies that you and I take for granted because we've been there since the beginning.
Yeah, we grew up with it. Yeah.
But it's easy to see how some people may not quite get it. So I think that pretty much covers, at least the basic set of what to look for when files can't be accessed. Can you think of anything else, or?
Yeah, no, I'm sure if our listeners have additional scenarios or things, you could probably stump us on stuff, but we could, maybe point you at a few things to check to maybe get you unstuck. But would be interested to see what you've got, what you've encountered, and kind of what your solution has been with that.
Yep. And as always, you can reach out to us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, leave comments below on YouTube or on your favorite podcast, or reach out to us directly. We're always happy to chat and to learn some more. And maybe we'll share your questions on a future episode of Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
You as well, Mark. Have a good week.
You too. Take care, everybody.